Now these ashes have grown cold. We open the old book. These oil-stained pages recount the tales of the fallen, a frayed empire, words without warmth. The hearth has ebbed. Its gleam and life sparks are but memories against dimming eyes. What casts my mind? What hue my thoughts as I open the Book of the Fallen and breathe deep the scent of history? Listen then to these words carried on that breath. These tales are the tales of us all, again, yet again. We are history relived, and that is all. Without end, that is all.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's Cal here from Really Good and Kind. And we have my new setup here, complete with sound and green screen, so I can do some lovely sort of stuff. My attempt at doing lovely sort of stuff. Anyway, I also got this shirt here for Christmas from Iskar Jarek of the Unabridged Burners. I can never say it right. Thank you, Iskar Jarek, for sending this to me. It's really nice. In 2020, we're going to be moving towards trying to produce 3 videos a week, starting next week, where I'm going to be doing one today. I should be dropping Sunday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So that should be a lot of fun. We're going to have 3 ongoing series. We're going to have analysis of the Fallen, summaries of the Fallen, and then we're going to be kind of responding to different criticisms and things that I see online of these books. So today we are going to kind of answer Niflrog's challenge for the top 10 or favorite scenes in Malazan Book of the Fallen. We're going to have 3 different types of scenes. We're going to have really powerful, bombastic set pieces. Then we're going to have emotional gut punches. And then we're going to have scenes that I think are layered with a bunch of meaning. So we're going to do 3 of each, and we're going to go from there. So as far as, let's do one of the bombastic set pieces first. One of my favorite scenes in the entire series has got to be in Gardens of the Moon, the end of the Siege of Pale. I love the way this whole thing is set up. We begin at the end of the siege, and then we go back through Tattersail's point of view, and then we go all the way back up to the siege, and then we move beyond it to the end of that chapter. And it is just packed with so many amazing moments. This is where we get our first explanation of what a warren is, which is one of my all-time favorite things to talk about in Malazan period. If you're interested in a primer on that, go watch that video. But it's an incredible imagery. We have Khaled sacrificing himself for Tattersail, Tattersail recalling that she didn't have enough strength to be able to protect all of the soldiers. And we get one of my favorite reoccurring motifs between the mages and the marines, which is always an even exchange or always an even trade, where you look out for me and I look out for you, always an even exchange. It's a beautiful sort of sentiment, and I really like that. It's something I try to emulate in my real life. Tattersail's grief at the loss of her lover Khaled is palpable and sad, but also the unveiling of how powerful these high mages are is incredible. We're gonna have a quick pause here where I read a little bit of that book. Dun-dun-dun. Time to work, Hairlock called. Khaled and Tattersail swung around. A shiver ran through her. Moonspawn had been revolving steadily for the last 3 years. It had just stopped. Near its very top, on the side facing them, was a small ledge, and a shadowed recess had appeared. A portal. No movement showed yet. "He knows," she whispered. "And he isn't running," Khaled added. Down on the first hill, High Mage T'lan rose and lifted his arms out to the side. A wave of golden flame spanned his hands, then rolled upward, growing as it raced towards Moonspawn. The spell crashed against the black rock, sending chunks hurtling out and then down. A rain of death descended into the city of Pale and among the Malazan legions waiting in the plain. "It's begun," Khaled breathed. Silence answered T'lan's attack, save for the faint scatter of rubble on the city's tiled rooftops and the distant cries of wounded soldiers on the plain. Everyone's eyes were trained upward. The reply was not one any expected. A black cloud enshrouded Moonspawn, followed by faint shrieking. A moment later, the cloud split out, fragmenting, and Tattersail realized what she was seeing. Ravens. Thousands upon thousands of great ravens. They must have nested among the crags and pocks in the moon's surface. Their shrieks grew more defined, a caterwaul of outrage. They wheeled out from the moon, their 15-foot wingspans catching the wind and lifting them high above the city and plain. Fear lurched into Tattersail's heart. Hairlock barked a laugh and whirled to them. "These are the moon's messengers, colleagues!" Madness glittered in his eyes. "These carrion birds!" He flung back his cloak and raised his arms. "Imagine a lord who kept 30,000 great ravens well fed!" A figure had appeared on the ledge before the portal, its arms upraised, long silver hair blowing from its head. "Mane of Chaos, Anamander Rake, Lord of the Black-skinned Tistandi, who has looked down on 100,000 winters, who has tasted the blood of dragons, who leads the last of his kind, seated in a throne of sorrow in a kingdom tragic and fey, a kingdom with no land to call its own." Anamander Rake looked tiny against the backdrop of his edifice, almost insubstantial at this distance. The illusion was about to be shattered. She gasped as the aura of his power bloomed outward. To see at such distance. "Channel your warrants," Tattersail commanded, her voice cracking. "Now!" Even as Rake gathered his power, twin balls of fire raced upward from the center hill. They struck the moon near its base and rocked it. T'lan launched another wave of gilden flames, crashing with amber spume and red-tongue smoke. The moon's lord responded. A black, writhing wave rolled down the first hill. The High Mage was buffeted to his knees, deflecting it, the hilltop around him blighted as the Necros power rolled down the slopes, engulfing nearby ranks of soldiers. Tattersail watched as a midnight flash swallowed the hapless man, followed by a thump that thundered through the earth. When the flash dissipated, the soldiers lay in rotting heaps, mown down like stalks of grain. Gerald Galane's sorcery. Elder magic, the breath of chaos. Her breaths coming fast and tight in her chest, Tattersail felt her Thir Warren flow into her. She shaped it, muttering chaining words under her breath, then unleashed the power. Khaled followed, drawing from his Makra Warren. Hairlock surrounded himself in his own mysterious source, and the cadre entered the fray. Everything narrowed down for Tattersail from then on, yet a part of her mind remained distant, held on a leash of terror, observing with a kind of muffled vision all that happened around her. The world became a living nightmare as sorcery flew upward to batter Moonspawn, and sorcery rained downward, indiscriminate and devastating. Earth rose skyward in thunderous columns. Rocks ripped through men like hot stones through snow. A downpour of ash descended to cover the living and dead alike. The sky dimmed to pallid rose, the sun a coppery disk behind the haze. And the whole thing sets up all of the pieces which are from the previous setup of on the beach Ikokan, and then we actually have all of our pieces moving towards the eventual convergence on the Malazan side, moving towards the Geteron fate at the end of the book. I like that in this whole sequence, T'lan is presented in such a slimy, evil, gross sort of a way. If you've ever... the audiobook has one of my all-time favorite readers, Ralph Lister, doing the reading. excuse me. And his Tayshran voice is just beautiful. So that's one of my favorite all-time Bombastic set pieces. Next, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite emotional gut punches throughout the whole series, and this one is also from Gardens of the Moon. It's right after the adjunct Lorne has her confrontation with Blues of the Crimson Guard and T'lan Imass, and Ganois' reaction to seeing her fall. It's incredibly sad, and Ganois' inner thoughts watching this whole thing, and then him refusing to leave her there, and he picks her up to go bury her, and her thoughts right as she dies are just some of the most powerful things. I think Lorne is a very, very underrated character. We're gonna come back to that once we get into my favorite female characters. That'll either be in this video or the next one, but she is you could argue that her influence is what helped make Ganois into the man that he is for the rest of the series. And losing her in such a tragic way, when, you know, if they had just stopped to talk, maybe things could have been different. But when you work for the Empire, you sacrifice all that you have for the Empire, and she did.
Perrin found her sprawled on the grimy cobbles of an alley mouth. Something had drawn him to her unerringly, a final closing of the mysterious link between them. Her sword was beside her, the grip slick with blood, its edges gouged and nicked. The captain crouched beside her. "You made it a hard fight," he whispered, "for what that is worth." He watched her eyes flicker open. She stared up at him as recognition arrived. "Captain, Ganois, Adjunct, they have killed me." "Who?" She managed a stained smile. "I don't know. 2 women. Look like thieves. Thugs. Do you see the irony, Ganois Perrin?" Thin-lipped, he nodded. "No glorious end for the Adjunct. If you'd come a few minutes sooner." The captain said nothing. He watched the life leave Lorne, feeling nothing. "Ill luck knowing me, Adjunct. I'm sorry for that." Then he collected the Otaterral sword and slipped it into his scabbard. Above him, 2 voices spoke in unison. "You gave him our sword." He straightened to find himself facing Opan. "The rogue took it from me, to be more precise." The twins could not conceal their fear. They looked upon Perrin with something akin to pleading. "Cotillion spared you," the sister said. "The hound spared you. Why?" Perrin shrugged. "Do you blame the knife or the hand wielding it?" "Shadow Throne never plays fair," the brother whined, hugging himself. "You and Cotillion both used mortals," the captain said, baring his teeth, "and paid for it. What do you want from me? Sympathy? Help?" "The Otaterral blade," the sister said, "will not be used in your dirty work," Perrin finished. "You'd best flee, Opan. I imagine even now Cotillion has given Shadow Throne's sword chance, and the 2 are putting their heads together to plan how best to use it." The twin jesters flinched. Perrin laid a hand over the sword's sticky grip. "Now, else I return Cotillion's favor." The gods vanished. The captain drew a deep breath. He turned once again to Lorne. Her armor removed, she proved light in his arms. And then my other one, the other type of scene I want to talk about is things that are layered with so much meaning that they apply extremely to real life on top of that. My pick for one of those, should we do 3 from Gardens of the Moon? Yeah, we should do 3 from Gardens of the Moon. I'd say the dinner scene between Dujek One Arm, Tattersail,
Talk the Younger, and Adjunct Lorne, also in Gardens of the Moon, where we find out that the burning happening in the prologue of the Mouse Quarter was Tattersail and her cadre getting out of control while trying to enforce an unjust law, and that the Adjunct Lorne's family were killed in that whole conflagration. It sets up this idea of consequences rippling out beyond just the initial horror into something that comes back and bites so many years later. It bites Tattersail in that she's willing to fight Lorne in a duel with her Odoterral sword, Lorne's Odoterral sword, knowing that she wouldn't make it because this is some major guilt she continues to carry with her. And then we have a really interesting conversation where they remind her that she is the adjunct. And it's almost like going back to becoming the adjunct removes Lorne entirely from herself, such that she's able to let this go. And it's just absolutely heartbreaking. And when it's the idea of giving yourself over to an ideal, you do kind of lose yourself in that ideal. And that has, especially with the last 4 or 5 years here in America, you can see real life representations of that. Whether it's these kids going from their home out into the street to protest the injustices, or the hat-wearing guys who have decided that their hat is more important than the things that they actually see happening in front of them day to day. And that's not a knock on anyone who believes either of those things. It's just an observation from a book nerd who has too much time on his hands.
Dujek swung back to the adjunct. The Empire has its history, and we each are in it. In this, Tashrin rasped, I must agree with the High Fist adjunct. There's no need to have this all official, Tattersail said, her eyes on Lorne. I hereby challenge you to a duel. On my behalf, I shall employ all my magical skills in an effort to destroy you. You may defend yourself with your sword, adjunct. Tok took a step forward. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He'd been about to tell Tattersail that Lorne carried an Odoterral sword. The duel would be grossly unfair, that she'd die within seconds as the sword devoured her every spell. Then he saw that the sorceress knew all that. Dujek rounded on Tattersail. Damn it, woman! Do you think everything hinges on how it's worded? Execution, duel, none of it matters one whit. All that the adjunct does, all that she says, is on behalf of Empress Lasine. He spun to Lorne. You are here as Lasine's voice, as her will, adjunct. Tashrin spoke softly. The woman named Lorne, the woman who was once a child, who once had a family. He looked upon the adjunct with anguish in his eyes. That woman does not exist. She ceased to exist the day she became the adjunct. Lorne stared at the two men, her eyes wide. Standing beside her, Tok watched those words battering her will, crushing the anchor, shattering into dust every last vestige of identity. And from her eyes rose the icy, clinical repose of the adjunct to the Empress. Tok felt his heart pounding hard against his chest. He'd just witnessed an execution. The woman named Lorne had risen from the turgid mists of the past, risen to right a wrong, to find justice, and in that last act reclaim its life. And she had been denied, not by the words of Dujek or Tashrin, but by the thing known as the adjunct. Of course, she said, removing her hand from her sword. Please enter, Sorceress Tattersail, and dine with us. The flat tone of her voice told Tok that her invitation had not cost anything, and this horrified him, shook him to his very core. A quick glance showed a similar response from Tashrin and Dujek, though the latter failed it.
Next favorite bombastic set piece has to be Spoilers. Memories of Ice. Moonspawn rising from the sea outside of the city of Coral. Just wow. It's incredibly cinematic and not in a Sandon Branderton sort of a way. But it's one of those things that I can still close my eyes and listen to that part and see it just as powerfully as I did the first time. The reveal of that's where Rake had been the entire time is just, and of course the consequences for the Panyan Seer and the Panyan Domin are just amazing. That and Ganowis on the roof of the palace with Moonspawn less than 15 feet above his head, battling condors is just one of my all-time favorite things to read. I'm going to pause a bit and have a little bit of that.
Hood, take us, Quickbin swore. Those are Segula. But Perrin's attention had already left them, was oblivious of the battle as the Kell hunters closed with the Segula. The storm cloud that had towered overhead for so long was still climbing, shredding apart, almost lost in darkness. Something, he realized with a chill, was coming. Captain, follow me! Quickbin was edging along the low wall, following its curve towards the harbor side. Perrin scrambled after the wizard. They halted where they had a full view of the harbor and the bay. Far out in the bay, the horizon's line of ice was exploding all along its length in white spewing clouds. The waters of the harbor had grown glass smooth beneath the dark, now motionless air. The web of ropes spanning it with its shacks and dangling lines and withered corpses suddenly trembled. In Hood's name, what is— Shh! Oh, Abyss, watch! And he did. The glass-smooth waters of the harbor shivered, swelled, bulged, then impossibly fled on all sides. Black, enormous, something rising from the depths. Seas thrashed, a ring of foam racing outward. A sudden push of cold wind hammered the parapet, made the structure sway, then tremble. Rock, ragged, scarred, a hood-damned mountain rising from the harbor, lifting the vast net with it. And the mountain grew larger, rose higher, darkness bleeding from it in radiating waves. They've unveiled Corral Ghislaine! Quickbin shouted through the roaring wind. All of them! Perrin stared. Moonspawn, rising. Rake hid it. Oh, Abyss below, did Rake hide it? Rising, water descending down its battered sides in tumbling falls, into mist that flowed as the edifice climbed ever higher. The cut, Ortonal's cut, the chasm. Look! Quickbin hissed. Those cracks! And now he saw the cost of Rake's gambit. Huge fissures scarred the face of Moonspawn, fissures from which water still poured in undiminished volume. Rising. 2/3 now clear of the churned seas, slowly spinning, bringing into view, high on one side, a ledge, where stood a lone figure. Moonspawn rose, shrouded in darkness. Beyond the city, Kaladin broods stared. Cascading clouds of mist, streams of water falling, fading. Dragons now wheeling outward. Black, one crimson, waves of Corralled Ghislaine, lashing out, incinerating the demonic condors. Moonspawn leaning, a massive chunk of midnight stone sloughing from one side, rocking the entire edifice, leaning, sliding forward towards the keep. On the killing field below, scattered remnants of soldiers, Malazan, Barghast, Greyswords, Gruntle, and the handful of followers that were all that remained of his legion, had one and all crossed the stone bridge and were converging on the shattered north gate, unimpeded. The wall east of the gate was empty of mages, of anyone, stripped clean. Fires lit beyond the wall. The sky was filling with black moranth, great ravens, Corralled Ghislaine spreading out, down onto Coral, a shrew unveiling. All of the Tistandi, joined in ritual magic. The world has never known this, in all the millennia since their arrival, never known this. Burns' heart what will come of this unveiling. He continued, staring, overcome with a vast, soul-numbing helplessness. The power flowed towards Corlad, her eyes flashed as she and her brother swept on the cold, familiar currents of Corralled Ghislaine towards Moonspawn. Oh, it was dying. She could see that. Dying, but not yet completed its dreadful, deadly task. She watched it moving, drawing closer to the keep's parapet, to where she could now see stood the seer, the Jaghut, clutching the matron's finis, staring upward, frozen as the black towering mountain inexorably approached. Darkness come to this world, to this city, to this place. Darkness that could never dissipate. Coral. Black, black coral.
Moving on. Okay, then another emotional sort of gut punch for me is Reaper's Gale. Reaper's Gale is the perfect novel in my opinion. Fight me. It's seriously in my top 5 novels of all time. I rank it above Toll the Hounds in the series, but that's just me. Is when Nissal is watching the Emperor near the beginning, and Rhulad is not a good person. We've already had that established, by not just by what happens at the beginning of House of Chains, but also by his actions during Midnight Tides, and then what we see the consequences of his quest for champions just a little bit in the Bone Hunters through Alrata Ann's eyes, which is one of the most harrowing things I've ever read in my entire life. And then he has screwed up so badly, and he knows it, and to see him try to change the Lethiri for what he thinks the better would be, only to be continuously manipulated by Trebednol and Karos and Vigdad and his ilk, is just incredibly sad. Especially when we find out that the Eater who were outside of the continent of Lether, that what do you call them? His mother and father went and, in their rage, put in prison, and his reaction to that being like, oh, even my family, who I've always counted on, is gonna lie to me, is just, it's incredibly sad. And I really felt for Rhulad in those scenes, and he is such a despicable person. But props to you, Mr. Erickson, for making me feel that for that person. It's probably not an easy thing to do, but it is one of my favorite emotional sort of scenes, is to see almost the Rhulad we could have gotten if he had decided that power wasn't the most important thing, and that doing the right thing was more important.
The consort Tuord al-Brizad had vanished, although Nissal had heard rumors among the court servants that he had not gone far, that he haunted the lesser-traveled corridors and subterraneans and mysteries of the old palace, ghostly and rarely more than half seen. She was undecided on the veracity of such claims. Even so, if he were indeed hiding still in the palace, she realized that such a thing would not surprise her in the least. It did not matter. Rhulad had no wife, after all. The Emperor's lover, a role she was accustomed to, although it did not seem that way. Rhulad was so young, so different from his Gara Diskanar. His spiritual wounds were too deep to be healed by her touch, and even so, even as she found herself in a position of eminence, of power, close as she was to the throne, she felt helpless and profoundly alone. She stood, watching the Emperor of Lether writhing as he curled up ever tighter in the corner of the room. Among the whimpers, groans, and gasps, he spat out fragments of his conversation with Troll, his forsaken brother, and again, in hoarse whispers, Rhulad begged forgiveness.
Yeah. And then one of my favorite scenes of I think is layered with all kinds of meaning is the final confrontation between Karos and Vigdad and Tehel Bedict at the end of Reaper's Gale, where they are sitting there in the room talking to each other, and Tehel solves the puzzle for him, And then T'lan gives him his little speech about humor and the nuances in conversation, and how Karos Invictad isn't as smart as he thinks he is. 93%, 93.5%. Just...
Karos Invictad regarded T'lan from above steepled fingers.
Very close,
he said after a time. T'lan, who had been staring dazedly at the puzzle box on the desk, stirred slightly, then looked up with his mismatched eyes.
Very close, Karos repeated. The measure of your intelligence compared to mine? You are, I believe, the closest to my equal of any man I have ever met.
Really? Thank you.
Normally, I do not express my admiration for intelligence in others, primarily because I am surrounded by idiots and fools.
Even idiots and fools need supreme leaders, T'lan cut in, then smiled, then winced as cuts opened on his lips, then smiled more broadly than before.
Attempts at humor, alas, Karos said with a sigh, poorly disguise the deficiencies of one's intelligence. Perhaps that alone is what distinguishes the two of us.
T'lan's smile faded, and suddenly he looked dismayed. You never attempt humor, Invigilator?
The mind is capable of playing countless games, T'lan. Some are useful, others are worthless, a waste of time. Humor is a prime example of the latter.
Funny.
Excuse me?
Oh, sorry, I was just thinking. Funny.
What is?
You wouldn't get it, alas.
You actually imagine yourself brighter than me?
I have no idea regarding that, but since you abjure all aspects of humor, anything I might consider and then observe with the word funny is obviously something you would not understand. T'lan then leaned slightly forward. But wait, that's just it.
What nonsense are you?
It's why I am, after all, much smarter than you. Karos Invictad smiled.
Indeed. Please do explain yourself.
Why, without a sense of humor, you are blind to much in the world, to human nature, to the absurdity of so much that we say and do. Consider this the most poignant example. A mob approaches, seeking my head because I stole all their money, and what do you have to appease them? Why, throw them all the money you've stolen from them. And yet, it's clear that you were completely unaware of just how hilarious that really is. You made your decision unmindful of what? 80% of its delicious nuances. 90%. 93% and a half, or just shy of a half, but more than a third, but less than somewhere close to a halfman. Karos Invictad waggled a finger.
Incorrect, I'm afraid. It is not that I was unmindful, it is that I was indifferent to such nuances as you call them. They are, in fact, entirely meaningless.
Well, you may have a point there, since you seem capable of being appreciative of your own brilliance despite your ignorance. But let's see, perhaps I can come up with another example.
You are wasting your time, T'lan, and mine.
I am? It didn't seem you were very busy. What is so occupying you, Invigilator? Apart from anarchy in the streets, economic collapse, invading armies, dead agents, and burning horses, I mean. The answer was involuntary, as Karos Invictad's eyes flicked down to the puzzle box. He corrected himself, but too late, for he saw a dawning realization in T'lan's bruised face, and the man leaned yet farther forward in his chair. What's this then? Some magic receptacle, in which will be found all the solutions in this troubled world? Must be to so demand all of your formidable genius. Wait, is something moving in there?
The puzzle is nothing, Karos Invictad said, waving one bejeweled hand. We were speaking of your failings.
T'lan leaned back, grimacing. Oh, my failings. Was that the topic of this sizzling discourse? I'm afraid I got confused.
Some puzzles have no solution,
Karos said, and he could somehow hear his own voice had grown higher pitched. He forced himself to draw a deep breath, then said in a lower tone.
Someone sought to confound me, suggesting that a solution was possible, but I see now that no solution was ever possible. The fool did not play fair, and I so dislike such creatures, and I could find him or her, I would make an immediate arrest, and this entire building would echo with the fool's screams and shrieks.
Karos paused when he saw T'lan frowning at him.
What is it?
Nothing. Funny, though. The Invigilator reached for his scepter and lifted it from the desktop, pleased as ever with the solid weight of the symbol, how it felt in his hand. Okay, not funny. Sorry I said anything. Don't hit me with that thing again, please. Although, Tehel added, considering it's the symbol of your office, hitting me with it, while somewhat heavy-handed, is nevertheless somewhat funny.
I am thinking of giving you over to the citizens of Leatheris, Caro said, glancing up to gauge how the man would react to that statement, and was surprised to see the fool smiling again. You think I jest?
Never, obviously.
Then you would enjoy being torn apart by the mob?
I doubt it, but then I wouldn't be, would I? Torn apart, I mean.
Oh, and why not?
Because not only do I have more money than you, Invigilator, I am, unlike you, entirely indifferent regarding who ends up owning it. Hand me over, by all means, sir. And watch me buy my life. Karis and Victad stared at the man. Tehel wagged a broken finger. People with no sense or appreciation of humor, Invigilator, always take money too seriously. It's possession, anyway, which is why they spend all their time stacking coins, counting this and that, gazing lovingly over their hoards, and so on. They're compensating for the abject penury everywhere else in their lives. Nice rings, by the way. Karos forced himself to remain calm in the face of such overt insults.
I said I was thinking of handing you over. Alas, you have just given me a reason not to. So you assure your own drowning come the morrow. Satisfied?
Well, if my satisfaction is essential, then might I suggest...
Enough, Tehel Benedict. You no longer interest me.
Good. Can I go now?
Wonderful, and very, very applicable to real life as well. You do find that the people with the least amount of humor can somehow be incredibly dangerous to not just themselves but to society as a whole. Especially if these are people who have been granted power by the populace. Or my number one. Favorite set piece, bombastic scene. Let's see. Yes. Fëanor's Last Stand. Spoilers, the Crippled God. So I'm going to pause and read a little bit of that right here.
Onas T'lan could hear weeping, but this was the sound of something unseen. Something long hidden in the souls of the T'lan Imass. He had never expected it to awaken, had never expected to feel it again. In his mind, he saw a child, clothed in mortal flesh, lifting a face to the heavens, and that face was his own, so long ago now. There had been dreams, but even as they faded, the child boy wept with shuddering convulsions. Things die, dreams fall to dust. Innocence bleeds out to soak the ground. Love settles in cold ashes. We had so much, but we surrendered it all. It was unforgivable. He rose again on a broad level stretch of land where a village had once stood. It had been made mostly of wood, and that wood had been taken away to build engines of war. Now only the foundation stones remain. The raised road ran into it, sloped until it was level with the cobbled street at the village's edge. His kin rose around him, and they moved out to present a broad front facing onto that road, there to await the army. They could now see to the west. The sounds of thousands of marching boots on cobbles was a solid roar underfoot. We will fight here, because the fighting and the killing goes on forever, and the child will shed his tears until the end of time. I remember so many loves. So many things lost. I remember being broken, again and again. There need be no end to it. There is no law to say that one cannot break one more time. When he raised his weapon, his kin followed suit. 7,459 T'lan Imass. Another battle, the same war. The war we never lost, yet never knew how to win. The concussion that clove through the heaving clouds behind them staggered the T'lan Imass, a thunder so loud it shivered their bones. Wheeling round, Onas T'lan stared up to see a stone sword, an Imass sword, descending as if held in the hand of the jade strangers, impossibly huge, slicing down through a vague bestial shape that then staggered. twin embers of crimson, eyes suddenly blossomed as if filling with blood. A roar sounded, filling the air with such fury and pain that it pounded the entire army of T'lan Imass back a step, and then another, the death cry of a god. And the heavens erupted. Onas T'lan watched as waves of blood descended, falling earthward. He watched the crimson sheets rolling across the land, watched them roll ever closer, and then, with yet another roar, the rain slammed down upon the T'lan Imass, driving them all to their knees. Head bowed beneath the deluge, Onas T'lan gasped. One breath. Another. And his eyes, fixed now upon the hands on his knees, slowly widened as the withered skin softened, thickened, as muscles expanded. Another terrible gasp of breath deep into aching lungs from his kin. Sudden cries of shock, of wonder. We are remade by the blood of a slain god. We are reborn. Then he lifted his gaze to look upon the Colansi ranks, fast closing upon their position. This was ill-timed.
And then the proceeding rain of blood, and then to have Tool's little mention right there at the end when he realizes he has flesh and blood again. This was ill-timed. Just also Stormy and Gessler's little argument about whose fault it was that Fainer showed up is just one of my favorite little comedy bits in the entire series. It's incredibly dark, but it's that soldier's humor. It's that need to contextualize things within a framework you can understand in order to deal with it in the moment. It's just one of my favorite things. Top number one emotional gut punch of a moment. 3 words from the Crippled God. I lost her. Oh, that part hurts in a good way. Because Tavor or Tavoret, depending on who you talk to, is one of the most layered and complex characters in fiction, who we never really get to see inside their head at all. And to be able to pull off that level of emotional catharsis from something we've only seen the deliberately cold exterior of is just incredible. And it speaks a lot to her sense of duty, that she was in a terrible situation with Felice and Lacine, who we're going to have a separate video about Lacine and perception versus the reality of the person, which is another really big theme overall in the series. And her handling of that is we can be argued to death about whether or not she could have done better, and probably she could have, but everyone can do better in hindsight. And that it's something that she's still carrying with her, even across the glass desert and across the sea and away from Raraku, and all of that is just, it's incredible. And one of my favorite things to have ever read, thank you Mr. Erickson, just incredibly good. Then last scene that we have sort of layered with all kinds of meaning would be, of course, again, spoilers, Crippled God, a scene I like to call Laughter on the Hill, in the final confrontation between the Fork Will Assail and the Bone Hunters. The great ravens have already landed and returned the flesh to Kamansad, and they're in the middle of fighting and dying, and there's a short little break in the action. And I'm gonna read this part too because it's just so good.
He knew which world he wanted to live in, but people didn't have that choice, did they? Not unless they killed the spark inside themselves first, with drink, with the oblivion of sweet smoke. But those were false dreams and made mockery of the ones truly lost, the ones whose lives had passed. Around him, the desperate gulps of breath were fading, the groans falling off as wounds were bound. Few soldiers had the strength to move, and he knew that they were now settled as he was, here against this stone, too tired to move. From the slope on all sides, the low cries and moans of wounded Kalansi lifted up, soft and forlorn, abandoned. The Malazans had killed hundreds, and wounded even more, and still the attackers would not relent, as if this hill had become the lone island in a world of rising seas. But it's not that. It's just the place we chose, to do what's right. But then, maybe that alone gives reason to take us down, to destroy us. Hedge was silent beside him, but not asleep. If he had been, his snores would have driven them all from this place, the Crippled God included, chains be damned. And from the army still surrounding them, down on the lower ground, nothing more than a sullen mutter of sound, soldiers resting, checking weapons and armor, readying for the next assault. The last assault. 20-odd soldiers cannot stop an army, even these soldiers. Someone coughed nearby from some huddle of stones, and then spoke.
So, who are we fighting for again?
Fiddler could not place the voice, nor the one that replied, everyone. A long pause, and then,
no wonder we're losing.
6. A dozen heartbeats before someone snorted. A rumbling laugh followed, and then someone else burst out in a howl of mirth, and all at once, from the dark places among the rocks of this barrow, laughter burgeoned, rolled round, bounced, and echoed. Fiddler felt his mouth cracking in a wide grin, and then he barked a laugh, and then another. And then he simply could not stop, pain clenching his side. Beside him, Hedge was suddenly hysterical, twisting over and curling up as the laughter poured out of him. Tears now in Fiddler's eyes, wiping them frantically, but the laughter went on, and on. Smiles looked over at the others in her squad, saw them doubling over, saw faces flushed with tears and streaming down. Bottle, Korik, even Tar, and Smiles smiled. When her squadmates saw that, they convulsed as if gut stabbed. Lying jammed in a crack between two stones, a third of the way down the slope, half buried beneath Kalansi corpses and feeling the blood draining away from the deep mortal wounds in his chest, Cuddle heard that laughter, and in his mind he went back, and back. Childhood, the battles they fought, the towering redoubts they defended, the sunny days of dust and sticks for swords and running this way and that, where time was nothing but a world without horizons, and the days never closed, and every stone felt perfect in the palm of the hand, and when a bruise arrived or a cut opened red, why he need only run to his ma or da, and they would take his shock and indignation and make it all seem less important. And then that disturbance would be gone, drifting into the time of before, and up ahead there was only the sun and the brightness of never growing up. To the stones and sweat and blood here, in this last resting place, Cuddle smiled, and then he whispered to them in his mind, "You should have seen our last stands. They were something. They were something." Darkness, and then brightness. Brightness like a summer day without end. He went there without a single look back. Lying beneath the weight of the chains, the crippled god, who had been listening, now heard. Long forgotten, half-disbelieved emotions rose up through him, ferocious and bright. He drew a sharp breath, feeling his throat tighten.
I will remember this. I will set out scrolls and burn upon them the names of these fallen. I will make of this work a holy tome, and no other shall be needed. Hear them, they are humanity unfurled, laid out for all to see, if one would dare look. There shall be a book, and it shall be written by my hand. Wheel and seek the faces of 1,000 gods. None can do what I can do. Not one can give voice to this holy creation. But this is not bravado, for this, my book of the fallen, the only god worthy of its telling is the crippled one, the broken one. And has it not always been thus? I never hid my hurts. I never disguised my dreams. And I never lost my way. And only the fallen can rise again.
He listened to the laughter, and suddenly the weight of those chains was as nothing. Nothing.
But, and laughter breaks out all over the hill. And that's like the personification of Fiddler's influence and the Malazans sticking true to who they are, even in the most terrible of situations. And it reminds me of Camus, who wrote what's the book? Or it's not a book. It's like I think it's like a 7-page essay about the myth of Sisyphus. The myth of Sisyphus. And it's like a absurdist sort of thinking is, for those who don't know, Sisyphus in the Greek pantheon or Greek mythology, I think it's Greek mythology anyway, someone will correct me if I'm wrong, he's in hell and he's doomed to eternally push a boulder up a hill. And as soon as it looks like he might succeed at getting this boulder up the hill, the boulder rolls back down. And the absurdist way of looking at that is that Sisyphus is happy. He have a smile on his face. Because he can't escape. He can't do anything else except his eternal task, but he knows what that task is, and he knows exactly how it's going to play out for him. So the only thing to fix is his relationship to the task. And just kind of like the creed of the mockers, he chooses, at least in this interpretation, he chooses to smile and to laugh than to gnash his teeth and bemoan his fate, which I don't know, what the intention is behind that laughter on the hill scene, but it's kind of how I saw it. Is it's even in when things are at their worst, you can still choose how you react to it, and the bone hunters choose laughter. They choose each other, and Cabin-Sod, this wretched creature of pain and misery, who over the course of the series we've probably come to despise, before knowing what Tavor's eventual plan was in order to free him. He decides he will write a Book of the Fallen in honor of these laughing soldiers who laugh in the face of death and pain and misery, and that's awesome. Number one fuck yes moment we'll do top 3 fuck yeah moments from the series. I'll do them one right after the other. Number 3, Quick Ben, spoilers, Memories of Ice, talking to Beauchelain in the city of Capustan. You should have only revealed half of your power. I did. Whap! Then number 2 is in Reaper's Gale again. You see, one of my favorite novels. Ublala Pung meeting Karsa Orlong in the Emperor's encampment. I'll knock your head together is one of my favorite quotes, but also once he's in there and he's actually talking to Karsa, he gets down on one knee and he says, lead me, war leader. And then Karsa punches him in the face. It's just one of my favorite. I was like, yeah, getting that phrase delivered in that way at that time by that character to Karsa, the guy who we originally heard say it all the time, just awesome. Number 1. Spoilers, the Crippled God. Bone hunters yield only to death on this day. Just amazing. That's Tavoray's last speech at the Hill before the end really begins. For someone who doesn't say a lot, she gets some of the absolute best lines in the series. That's one of them. Her entire speech recalled by Blistig in Reaper's Gale being a close second. The unwitnessed speech, as you'll see it called online, just amazing and incredible. So, all right, that's it for now. I'm going to go ahead and get to editing this beast, along with my new green screen to see what I can do with it. I hope you guys are having a good day. And as always, an even exchange. Thanks.